Hi there and welcome to All About Money. I'm your host, Dhruv Tikekar. Over the past month, a dried-up riverbed in the Iranian city of Isfahan, south of Tehran, has been the site of several protests. These have largely centered around one issue: water, or the lack thereof. Iran has been grappling with water shortages for many years now, and while it has been attributed to issues like climate change and international sanctions, critics argue that at its core, it's also very much a management problem. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today on our show. Joining me from the U.S. to talk about this is Kaveh Madani. He's an environmental scientist, a research professor at the City College of New York, an activist, and the former deputy head of Iran's Department of Environment. Kaveh, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Great having you on. I suppose the best place to start would be, a general overview of what we're seeing in Iran right now. I mean, now prior to this discussion, we were speaking about the issue, and I did bring up that I wanted to focus on the water crisis, and then you corrected me, and you in fact said that it's not a crisis. We're past that point. We're actually looking at a water bankruptcy in Iran. So starting from there, I wanted to obviously break a few things down. What brought it to the brink of a crisis, and when did it switch from being a crisis to an issue of bankruptcy?
Well, crisis is an extreme situation in which all forces unite to address the problem. And when you are in a crisis, you try to mitigate the problem and do whatever you can to restore the system. But what we are seeing in today's Iran is a lot of damages that cannot be restored. It's not possible to restore the groundwater level back to where it was, at least in a reasonable period of time. It's not possible to restore lots of wetlands, rivers, land subsidence, and lots of other things that we have seen as the result of water shortages. Now, speaking of water bankruptcy, I say this is a post-crisis stage. We are in a situation where we have to admit that we have failed. Iran has failed. And in addition to mitigation, Iran has to also invest in adaptation and getting used to an unfortunate and sad new normal. When I say water bankruptcy, I also explain it in this way. Imagine your checking account being your surface water. Iran has been using its surface water. Whenever you are short in your checking account, you go after your saving account. Iran went and used its underground resources, groundwater, which it inherited from my generation, essentially inherited from our ancestors. That resource has been also drained. Now we have a lot of right holders. We have who are asking for water, but there is no enough water in the account. So this state is water bankrupt with lots of credit cards actually that cannot be paid back, with lots of creditors who cannot be satisfied, and environment is one of them. Actually, it's the silent one. Actually, the silent right holder, which cannot speak out and ask for its right. But there are signs. We see the rivers being dry. We see dust storms now coming from the dry wetlands. We see desertification. We see deforestation. We see wildfires around the country. We see lots of problems, all caused by really, really bad management and exacerbated by frequent droughts, climate change, and other issues that you can think of.
When you say bad management, walk us through the water governance structure in Iran. What are we talking about when you mean bad management? Is it an issue of corruption? Is there an uneven distribution of resources to manage water supplies? What is it exactly?
Bad management and governance has lots of elements, from the structure of the water management, how the stakeholders are involved in the process, who makes a decision on how to allocate water, where to develop, and so on. Iran has a very central and hierarchical system, and that comes with that actually paves the way for having corruption. It also decreases the efficiency and effectiveness of the management system. But putting these things aside, we have to think about why Iran ended up in this situation. Iran is a water short region to begin with. This is natural to Iran. Iran is not as rich as, for example, Hong Kong when it comes to water availability. It's a Middle Eastern country. Among the Middle Eastern countries is one of the water-rich countries. But it had a certain budget naturally. Then it decided to develop like many other countries. The oil money was available, and Iran decided to develop further and further. One of the sectors that Iran developed was the agricultural sector, which currently takes more than 90% of Iran's water. And because of Iran's climate, most of the agriculture is irrigated. Wherever you irrigate, you eventually run out of water unless you put a cap on how much water you're using for irrigation, what the area of irrigated land should be in the country, what crops you choose, and so on. What we are seeing today was not created overnight. This is the outcome of decades of bad management, poor governance, and lack of foresight. All of these things were projectable. All of these things were predictable. People warned about it, including myself, that many years ago, we talked about the current situation, but the government, the system ignored all these things. As soon as there was a rain and a flood, they thought that the bankruptcy is over, and they can continue developing in dry areas. Central Iran right now, the city of Isfahan, is suffering from a clear sign of water bankruptcy. You don't see a drop of water in the river. Lots of farmers who are mad. Industry is suffering. The city is suffering. Lots of people are complaining about the environmental injustice implications of the development plans.
You touched on the agricultural sector over there, and you mentioned obviously that that sector is consuming over 90%, which is a baffling number to begin with. But something else that you've mentioned in your writing before is how this sector is economically inefficient. Now, when you say it's economically inefficient, is it because of the resources that the sector has at its disposal? Is it because of the infrastructure that's provided to these farmers, incentives that are provided to these farmers? What exactly are we talking about when you say an inefficient system that we have in place for farming?
Iran has, unfortunately or fortunately, an oil-based economy. So oil is what pays for the country. So the oil income is transferred to the agricultural sector as subsidies. Subsidies are given to farmers on land, on electricity, on water, on fertilizers, and so on. So that in that sector, farmers can continue growing food. Iran also has had this slogan of food self-sufficiency after the 1979 revolution. The emphasis on food self-sufficiency has become stronger under sanctions, under the war with Iraq. Iran has been always paranoid about this issue. So on one side, there was incentive to grow the agricultural sector. On the other hand, there was the issue of jobs and employment. The agricultural sector is providing jobs to the poor, to the subsistence farmers who don't have any alternative source of income and livelihood. As long as the economy functions this way, Iran needs to bribe its water and land to the farmers so they can operate. This has made the agriculture sector very inefficient. So the added economic value of using water in this sector is quite low. In dry parts of Iran, the farmers are growing cucumber and tomatoes, which are using a lot of water and don't result in a big economic return. On top of all these issues, we have the issue of uneven distribution of the population. The population of Iran got more than doubled after the 1979 revolution, and then these people went to some metropolitans, like a few big metropolitans, and the rest of the country doesn't have enough medium-sized cities. So all the resources must be given to the big cities, and this results in uneven development, which is another cause of environmental injustice. So all these, ingredients together provide a perfect mix to not only damage the environment, but also make humans unhappy and dissatisfied and hopeless, actually, because now they're losing their income. Unless Iran revises its economy, reforms its economy drastically, unless it expands its industrial sector, it provides alternative jobs in the service and industrial sector to the farmers, it is really hard to revise and reform the agricultural sector and make it industrialized.
Kaveh, obviously a lot more to get to over there, but we do have to go to a quick break. We'll be right back.